Hi, this is Katie Kahn. In this video, I'm going over the first step of rebuilding the 318 engine in our 1973 Winnebago Brave. When it was assembled, the engine ran and sounded pretty good, even with the steering column removed. We did a short test drive before buying, but we had her towed nearly 100 miles to our property because the brakes didn't work. That worked out well because the engine probably wouldn't have made the drive anyway. It looked like the oil was never changed. There was thick sludge in and around everything, and several bolts were rusted in place. A huge resource has been the ClassicWinnebagos.com forum, which is full of people who have gone through the same thing. One wonderful person on the forum suggested that we use Enforce, a lubricant that cuts through the grime and rust that has accumulated over the years of neglect. This stuff is awesome. We wouldn't have gotten far without it. The first goal when we were taking the engine apart was to check the VIN number stamped on the engine block to make sure it is what's supposed to be in there. Once we got the exhaust manifold off, we were able to clearly read the VIN. Then we went to the Dodge VIN Decoder on ClassicWinnebagos.com. There's a link in the video description below. The VIN confirmed that it was the 318 engine that we were expecting, and more specifically an LA 318-3 on a Dodge M300 motorhome chassis. As we took off each part of the engine, we put the bolts and other small pieces into baggies and labeled them. We also took pictures from several angles so we can see how the parts go back together when it's time. Then the part got cleaned depending on the level of sludge and rust. On the outer parts, I just used a wire brush, but things got nastier as we got deeper into the engine. The semi-dirty parts were soaked in paint thinner for an hour or so, and then were cleaned with various wire brushes and wire wheels. The worst parts, such as the intake manifold, valve covers, and timing chain cover, were soaked in degreaser and nearly boiling water, and scraped with a chisel and then a wire brush. Once most of the gunk was removed, I used a wire brush on a drill to sand down the rust where I could, and then used tiny wire brushes on a Dremel to get into the small crevices. All of the parts were wiped down with paint thinner to remove the last bits of debris, and then we painted each part as it was ready. First, a high-heat engine primer, then a high-heat engine paint in Hemi Orange. We're also painting some parts black for contrast. We'll have a cute little Halloween engine when it's done. Since we had already removed the dash and windshield to get at the carpet, as you saw in the last episode, accessing the engine was a breeze. The bumper made for a nice seat while working, but we eventually removed that so we could get the engine block out more easily. The most difficult thing to get off was the timing chain cover. The gasket had really sealed it onto the engine. We sprayed it down with Enforce, let it sit overnight, and in the morning it finally popped off. Despite being considered a small block, the engine is also considered industrial. Look at the size of that timing cover. It's at least 3 inches taller than a standard 318. And we found some odd things in the engine. This rather large piece of metal was banging around in the intake manifold. We aren't sure what it is or where it came from, but it looks like it's been in there for a while. Okay, now that we have disassembled, cleaned, and painted the engine components, and sent the block, heads, and crankshaft to get machined, we can start shopping for replacements for the parts and accessories that are shot. This is where a lot of patience and research comes in handy. But I'm not going to share our findings just yet. I want to test the parts first and make sure they're correct before I start running my mouth and have to eat my words later. This is going to take some time, so up next I'll show you why we installed a trap door in the cab.